before I start, I want to actually thank Julie who helped me actually pick out my story. I had several home stories you can ask my wife. She's been saying, are you going to tell Julie what your story is? I'm like, I got this one or this other one. But I'm not really getting any deep meaning. The one I was leaning towards is the time I came home after passing out for the first time at home and then coming to and being taken to the emergency room. Because I thought there was some deep meaning there, but now a week later I was sitting on the couch eating pizza rolls watching the G.I. Joe rerun, so obviously I didn't learn anything. But instead, I'm going to take it a different direction, because you always heard it's the moment when your house is a home. And I thought about the house my wife and I bought, and when that became a home, but I decided to go the other direction with it and talk about when my parents' home in rural South Dakota, a small town called Bevlin, actually became just a house. Or did it? I guess that's the hook. Okay. Anyway, kind of give you a little background. Back in 2010, we were going to go visit my parents for Thanksgiving for, I think, the first time. We never spent Thanksgiving with them. We always spent it with my wife's family because they live in Canby, which is closer. Bevlin's about 160 miles away, practically in North Dakota, actually. So, weather situations can change a lot around that time, and the weather predicted for Thanksgiving was terrible, so we called. My mom said, yeah, you shouldn't come, don't worry about it. We'll just do it again next year. But then I get a call from my brother the next morning that my mom has passed away unexpectedly at night, which set kind of the chain of events in motion. We said, forget the weather, we're going to go up there and help my stepdad, who has been married to my mom since 1980-something or other, 4, I think. So it had been over 25 years. So we hightailed it up to Bevlin to help Ernie with things, with funeral planning. My brother comes from Pierre. Just out of sheer luck, my brother actually is 20 years older than I am, so all of his kids are grown and moved out and onto their own lives. And they actually happened to all be in Pierre when it happened. So the whole crew came down to help with everything too. So we just had an impromptu brother and family get together. Then, a couple of years later, we've been trying to talk to my stepdad, who was in his 90s, because my mom liked older guys. He was not really keen on leaving Bevlin, even though he was getting to be about 90, and the house was kind of sliding into disrepair, and I had to call him every day to make sure he was okay. And finally, we talked him into living with his sister in Brookings for a while, and that lasted for about a month. But then she got really sick about the same time he got really sick, and they just couldn't be together because they couldn't take care of each other. So eventually we said, well, we'll take Ernie in for a while, because we've been trying to get him to our house for a long time. And we finally did get him to our house, and then 3 days later, as my wife is helping him try to stand up, he passes away. So in 2012, that's when the house in Bevlin officially became empty. Except for any of you, some of you may have gone through this, but as I learned, empty people, yes. Stuff everywhere. Stuff everywhere. Some of mine, some of my brothers, some of my parents I didn't know what to do with. So I met with my brother and we tried to get a game plan going for what we were going to do. And I remember one of the first times I went up there, and some of the things you just don't think about when a house is abandoned. The heater, we turned it all the way down, but the thermostat, one of those old dial thermostats, and it could only go down so far. And I couldn't get it to turn off, and it burned the rest of the fuel oil. So it was quite chilly in the house because it's South Dakota winter. But also, I had to park on the street and trudge through these huge drifts because nobody was plowing out the driveway. So I was able to carry some things of mine that were still left in the house, because you can ask my wife, I accumulated a lot of stuff, and there was still a lot of my stuff in South Dakota. That's a whole other separate story about moving out of my apartment. We'll spare that. She learned how good I was at Tetris, one game I'm actually good at. I had stuff. You'd think it would have cleared out because everything was so packed. But, so that came and went, and then spring came, and then my brother had handled a lot of the business, because I was only 5 years old when my dad had passed away. So he was 25, and he took care of a lot of the business with my mom, because he owned a gas station and had outstanding business things and all that. So I took on the role of handling Mom's house, or Ernie's house in this case. Well, first thing we found out, my mom had put in the house in my brother and I's name, which is all well and good. There's a little less of the legal problems. However, there was the adjacent lot for the driveway and the 2 adjacent lots and yard that she didn't. So I had to go through a whole legal process with that, and that was legal bills. And then another thing you don't think about when you're owning two houses is you get two property tax statements. So I had to pay taxes on a house in Veblen I was never going to use or live in. And the third thing about Veblen is it's not exactly a place everybody's packing up to move to. So selling it was proving a bit problematic as well. I mean, there are a lot of renters in the area. There's two giant dairy operations on either side of town, so there are a lot of migrant workers in town. And there are a lot of people wanting to rent, and nobody really wanting to buy. And that's not really something we wanted to deal with, people running back and forth. Because we're 160 miles away, my brother is 250 miles away. So it's not like we'd be close at hand if there was a problem we needed to address right away. So, and then I had to hire somebody to mow the yard. And I can tell you from when I grew up in that house that it is not a slow job when you have 4 city lots to mow and lots of trees and other obstacles. So that was $50 a crack. So that started piling up as well. And I've got my own family and my own house I'm paying taxes on, and I'm mowing the yard. Well, my wife likes to mow the yard. Ask her, she'll do it for you. And all of that. So, and then my brother, well, I finally had a guy who wanted to do kind of a rental / contract for deed thing. And then my brother wasn't really cool with the idea. He also was one of the few times he was kind of brusque with me about it. He wasn't ready to let go of the house yet, because he still had attachment for it. And I mean, I'm sure I did too, but at the time I was also thinking financially. And I didn't really think about my own attachment to it till a year later when we finally found somebody to buy it. And that's when it really started to sink in more, is that a lot of the stuff had been cleared out, but the memories were still there. I mean, it still smelled like my parents' house. I mean, even through all the winters and the summers with no air conditioning and sealed up and abandoned, it still smelled the same way it did when I was a kid and I'm a teenager, whenever I came to visit in college or after college. And of course, there was still a lot of stuff. I mean, we'd given most of the clothes to Goodwill and moved a lot of the furniture out, but there were still some things left. So we told the guy who bought the house, you know, we got everything we want, anything left is yours, and he was totally cool with that, actually, which was nice. But just the time going to the bank, when he got the check for the house, which we had to sell, we had it appraised for a certain amount. Let's just say it was appraised at low 5 figures, and we were happy to get high 4 figures for it in this town. So real estate is not a big move. But just kind of that day, I was thinking that was the day, all right, it was my home, and now it's just a house, I'm just selling it. You know, there's nothing really left for me to care about there. But then my brother says, let's go up to the attic. And in all my 39 or so years of being on the planet, I had never been in the house's attic, ever. My mom said, oh, don't bother, there's nothing up there. One of the many things my mom was not quite accurate about. Found a lot of my old brother's things up there, and a lot of old family heirlooms that nobody expected. A lot of old paperwork, a lot of notes, some of my dad's books from World War II. We found a plane guide for the Pacific Theater that had all the different planes in it. It was in really good condition. So we found a lot of things up there, and we took them down. And I'm driving back to Marshall, and it just kind of hits me all at once. It's like, well, you know when a house is a home, and now you think your home was just a house you got rid of, but now that's somebody else's home. But yet, if I drive by it, I'm still going to think that's my home, and it's never going to go away. So as to when a home becomes just a house, I don't know if there ever is a time in this situation. So, also, I had a thought there and it just escaped me. So I'll wrap up there.